The moon came up wrong that night, and I felt my own name begin to leave me. I was standing on the outer wall of the gray hold when it started, the last night of the harvest dark. The sky scoured clean and cold, every star sharp as a nail, and then the edge of the moon went the color of a wound. Not the honest silver I had known my whole life. The silver my mother used to say was the color of mercy. Red. A slow, spreading red, seeping across the pale face of it as if something high above had been cut and was bleeding down onto us all. I did not move. I had known this moon was coming for 3 months, and known in a deeper way that it was coming for my whole life, and there is a stillness that takes a man when the thing he has always dreaded finally stands in front of him. It is almost peace. Almost. Below me the courtyard emptied. I heard the gates groan open, the carts loaded in a hurry, the low keening of the old women who remembered the last time and did not want to see another. My warriors moved fast and did not meet each other's eyes, and when they passed beneath the wall where I stood, they did not look up at me the way they always had, the way men look at the one they have sworn their lives to. They looked at me the way you look at a man already laid out for burial, and are ashamed to be caught looking. I did not blame them, not one of them. I knew what the red moon meant, and every soul in Greymark knew it, and there is no cruelty in fleeing a thing you cannot fight. Once in a lifetime, sometimes less, the moon turned to blood over our northern lands, and on that night the alpha of the Grey Hold was unmade. It had been so since the founding, since the first of my blood took this cold kingdom under his hand. The old ones had a name for it that they said only in whispers, as if the saying might call it early. The unmaking. Under the red moon, they said, the Alpha's name is taken from him, his name, and his wolf, and everything that ever made him himself, until only the shape of a man is left, walking and breathing and hollow as a struck bell. I had seen it. That is the thing I have never been able to tell anyone in all the years since. I had seen it done to my own father, and so I did not need the old women's whispers to know it was true. I carried the truth of it in my body like an old wound that aches before rain. Let me tell it plainly, because everything that came after turns on it, and I have never once said it aloud. I was 19 the night my father's red moon came. He had ruled the Grey Hold 22 years by then, and he ruled it well, better than I have ever managed, though I have tried. Havard his name was. A big man, slow to anger and slower to forgive an injury done to his people, with a laugh you could hear across the whole hall and hands that could gentle a frightened horse or break a shield wall with equal ease. He had lost my mother to a hard winter when I was small, and after that he had poured everything he had into me and into Greymark both, as if by loving us hard enough he could hold back all the cold in the world. I worshipped him the way a boy worships the one certain thing in his life. I did not know then that certain things end. He had always known his red moon would come. An alpha of our line grows up knowing it the way other children grow up knowing they will one day be tall. He never spoke of it to me. He wanted me to have a childhood unshadowed, and I did, and I have thanked him for it every day since. But the winter I turned 19, the moon readers came to him privately, and I saw his face change, and I knew without being told that the counting was done and his time had come round. The night of it, he called me to him in the great hall. He had sent everyone else away already, that was his way, to spare them. Just the two of us and the fires burning high and the first red creeping into the windows. He put both his hands on my shoulders. I remember they were shaking, and I had never once in my life seen my father's hands shake. Listen to me now, he said. You are going to be alpha before dawn. I am sorry for it. I wanted you to have more years as only my son. He drew a breath. When the moon is full red, I will not be myself. You know the stories. They are all true. Whatever walks out of this hall in the morning wearing my face, it will not be your father. Your father is telling you goodbye now while he still can. Do you understand me? I did not understand. I was 19 and I loved him, and I could not make my mind hold the shape of a world without him in it. There must be something, I said. A healer, the readers, someone, there must be something we can do. There is nothing, he said, and he said it gently, which was worse than if he had said it hard. Every alpha of our blood has stood where I stand and reached for a way through, and there is none. My father reached. His father reached. I have spent 22 years reaching in the quiet hours, and I have found nothing but the same cold answer. Some curses have no lock to pick, son. This is one. He pulled me into his arms then and held me the way he had when I was small and afraid of the dark, and he said into my hair, "Bar the door behind me. Do not open it, whatever you hear, for anything that wears my face. Promise me you will not open the door." I promised him. It is the only promise I have ever hated keeping. He kissed my brow. I have felt the ghost of it 1,000 times since, always at the worst hours, and he told me he loved me and that I would be a better king than he had been, which was not true but was a kind thing to say to a boy. And then he walked to the far end of the hall into the red flooding dark, alone, because there was no one to go with him to the bottom of it. And I barred the door as he had made me swear, and I put my back against it, and I slid down to the floor and I waited. I will not tell you all of what I heard through that door. I have never told anyone, and I will carry it to my own grave. It is enough to say that my father was a proud man and a strong one, and that the unmaking is neither quick nor kind, and that there is a particular sound a strong man makes when he feels himself dissolving, and there is no one to hold on to, a sound I heard through an oak door when I was 19 years old, and have heard in my sleep every red season since. Toward the end he called my name. He called it, and I sat with my back against the door and my hands over my ears, and I kept my promise. God help me. I kept it, and I did not open the door. By the deepest hour the calling stopped. That was worse than the calling. At dawn the door opened from the other side, and a man walked out into the gray morning light who had my father's face and my father's frame and my father's big careful hands. And he looked at me sitting on the floor with my eyes swollen shut from a night of weeping, and he stopped, and he tilted his head the way a man does at a puzzle, and he said politely, so politely, that is the part that broke me, "Good morning. Forgive me, young man. Who are you?" He lived 11 more years. He never once remembered my name, or my mother's, or that he had ever been a father or a king. He was gentle to the end, a mild and pleasant emptiness that the whole hold cared for out of love for the man he had been. I sat with him often in those years, in the last cold room at the end of the hold, and told him stories about a great alpha named Havard who had ruled Greymark and laughed loud enough to shake the rafters. And he would smile at the stories the way you smile at a pleasant tale about a stranger, and thank me kindly, and ask if we had met. That was the curse of my blood. That was the unmaking. And now, 21 years later, I stood on the wall of the gray hold and the moon above me was going red, and I was the last of that line, no wife, no son, the counting done at last for me, and I could already feel it beginning. It is a strange thing to feel your own name loosen inside you. I need you to understand it, because it is the hinge the whole of this turns on, and I have no polished words for it, only the true ones. It was not pain. It was worse than pain, because pain at least insists you are still there to feel it. This was a quiet slipping, a word you have said 10,000 times suddenly going strange and hollow in your mouth, meaning nothing. Torvin. I said it to myself, standing there on the wall in the red light. Torvin, Alpha of Greymark, son of Havard. The words were all still there. But the man they belonged to was letting go of them, one finger at a time, and I could feel the letting go and could not stop it, the way you cannot stop yourself sliding when the ground beneath you has already given way. My wolf felt it first. All my life he had been a warmth in my chest, a second heart beating just behind the first. The one thing in this world I had never doubted was mine. He had been with me the night at the door. He had grieved my father alongside me in the wordless way of wolves. Now I felt him straining upward toward that bleeding moon like a hound toward a horn pitched too high for a man to hear. He wanted it. He wanted to go to the red and be unmade in it. And I could not hold him back, because to hold a thing you must know its name, and mine was leaving me. I came down off the wall. I do not remember choosing to. That is the way of the unmaking, I think. It takes the choosing from you first, and you find yourself moving without having decided to move. I found myself in the great hall of the Grey Hold, the long stone hall where 12 generations of my blood had ruled and been unmade, and it was empty. They had all gone. Every servant who had ever bowed to me at supper, every guard who had stood at my door, every adviser who had sat at my council table, gone up into the hills to wait out the red night as far from their doomed alpha as their legs would carry them. And they were right to go. I would have sent them myself. My father had sent them. His father had sent them. That is the mercy an alpha of my line performs last, before the end. He empties his hall so that no one need watch, and no one need be near the hollow thing he becomes. The great fires had burned down to sullen coals. The banners hung dead, still in the windless air. The red moonlight came in through the high windows and lay across the flagstones like spilled wine, and I stood in the very center of all that emptiness. The last alpha of Greymark, in the hall of his fathers, alone as every one of them had been alone, and I could no longer have told you my own father's name. That is when I heard her. She was singing, low and not for me, for herself, the way a person sings under their breath to keep their courage lit in the dark. A woman's voice coming from the far end of the hall, from the cold, cramped room where the old ones had once kept the moon lore, the dusty place no one had gone into for years. The song had no words that I knew. It was older than words, I have come to think, older than the hall, older than my blood's long curse. And the strangest thing, the one thing in all that unmaking night that still felt like itself, was that the red light seemed a shade less terrible where her voice reached, as if the song were a small warm hand held up against a great cold. I went toward it, because my wolf pulled me toward it, not toward the red moon now, toward the song. For the first time all night he had turned from the bleeding light in the windows and wanted something else, something on the ground, something warm, and I followed the wanting because it was the only thing left in me that still felt like mine. She was kneeling on the floor of the lore room, the old star charts spread out around her in a wide ring, a single candle burning at her side. She looked up when I filled the doorway, and I saw her whole body go tight with the knowing of what I was and what this night was. And she did not run. I knew her, dimly, the way you know a face you have passed 100 times and never once truly looked at. Saren, the keeper of the moon lore. The council called her the hedgewoman. On the rare occasions they called her anything at all, and they said it the way you flick a bit of ash off your sleeve. She had been raised by the last true moonwarden, a fierce old woman named Alder who had served my father and died a few years before I took the crown. After Alder died, Saren had simply stayed, living in the drafty cold end of the hold, tending the old charts, keeping the fires of a craft that everyone with any sense agreed had died with the old woman. She muttered about the moon. She read the stars. She was, by the unanimous judgment of every practical man in Greymark, a girl who had spent too many years shut up with a mad old woman and had caught the madness like a fever, and was to be pitied and ignored in roughly equal measure. And 3 months passed, she had come to my council. I remembered it now, standing in her doorway with my name draining out of me. She had come before the whole table, my steward Bram, my war chief Osric, all the grey practical heads of Greymark, and she had stood there, small and plain and unafraid, and she had told us that the red eclipse was coming. We knew that. The readers had told us. But then she had said the thing that made them laugh. She had said there was a way through it. There has never been a way through it, my steward Bram had said, not even bothering to be gentle. 12 alphas of this line, girl, 12, everyone unmade. If there were a way through, do you not think one of them in 12 generations might have stumbled onto it? They could not find it because they were all looking in the wrong place, Saren had said. Her voice had not shaken, though the whole table's contempt was on her. They looked for a lock to pick, a potion, a strength to out-wrestle it. It is none of those things. The unmaking is not a sickness to be cured. It is a debt. The moon is owed a name, and long ago this line stopped paying, and so the moon takes one, the alphas, every generation by force. But a debt taken by force can be settled by a debt paid freely. A true name freely given by the one soul the moon has marked to give it. That is the whole of the lore my grandmother kept. That is what she died believing. There is a way through the red moon. And here she had looked at me, only at me, down the length of that long table. But it needs two. It cannot be done alone. That is why every alpha before failed, not for want of courage, for want of a second person at the bottom of the dark, willing to hold on. Bram had laughed. Osric had looked at his own hands, embarrassed for her. And I had not laughed, because I did not laugh at much anymore, and because something in the way she said it had gone into me like a splinter. But I had told her, not unkindly, the thing my father told me and his father told him, that no alpha of my line had ever survived his red moon, and that hope was a cruelty she should not press on a doomed man. I had told her to let it be. She had looked at me a long moment, and then she had said the thing I had not been able to forget, though I had tried. "You do not believe me because no one has ever believed me," she had said. "That is not the same as being wrong." And then she had bowed and gathered her charts and gone. I had not sought her out again. Every wise man in my hall assured me she was a fool, and I was a man with a red moon coming and a kingdom to set in order before it took me, and I had let her be as she asked. I had spent those 3 months doing the last work of a dying alpha, the succession named to a cousin's steady son, the debts settled, the boarders secured, the long careful arranging of a house before the master leaves it forever. I had not spent 1 hour of it on the hope a hedgewoman offered me, because I had learned at 19, through an oak door, exactly what hope was worth against the red moon. And now the whole of my hall had fled into the hills, and the fool was still here, kneeling among her charts with her single candle, singing courage to herself in the dark. "You should not have stayed," I said. My own voice sounded far off to me as though it came from another room. It was getting harder to find, harder to work. "By dawn I will not know you. I may hurt you before then without meaning to. Go, bar a door somewhere deep in the hold, and do not open it for anything that wears my face." The words came out of me before I knew whose they were. And then I knew. They were my father's. The exact words he had given me at 19, come up out of my own throat as if they had been waiting there all these years. Something in me broke a little to hear them, to be on the other side of them now, the one walking into the dark instead of the boy at the door. She rose to her feet. She was not tall and she was not armed, and there was nothing in her face or her frame that any warrior in my hall would have called strength. But she did not go. "I have been waiting for this night since I was 9 years old," she said. "The night your father was unmade, my grandmother stood me at the high window and made me watch the moon go red, and she held me by the shoulders and told me, 'That will happen once more in your lifetime, child, and the next time you are the one who will stop it.' I have believed her every single day since. Every day of my whole life in this cold room, while every soul in Greymark laughed at me for it." She lifted her chin. "I am not going to go and bar a door, Torvin. I have been getting ready for tonight for 20 years. I am not going to hide from it now that it is finally here. My name." She said my name, Torvin, and I felt it. I have to be careful here, because I have told this to no one and the words are not smooth in my mouth yet. I felt my name catch on something in the way she said it and come back to me. Just a little, just the once. Like a coin you were sure you had dropped down a well and instead heard land at your feet in the dark. When she said it, my name was still mine. She had reached out and caught the end of it, the frayed end that was slipping away from me, and held it so it could not go all the way. "How?" I said, and it was hard to shape the question. "Do you know my name still fits me?" "Because the moon told me," she said. And I heard how it sounded, and I saw her see me hear it, saw the old habitual contempt rise up in me the way it rose in every practical man who had ever waved her off, the reflex of a lifetime. The moon told me. What madness! And she pressed on anyway, steady, the way a person walks straight into cold water because they have decided to and will not let the shock turn them back. I know how it sounds, she said. I have known how it sounds my whole life. There is nothing you can think about me right now that I have not already been told to my face 100 times. But listen, the old Moonwarden's craft was never madness. It was listening. My grandmother spent 60 years learning to hear what the moon says, the way you might spend 60 years learning a language no one else in the room can speak. And just because they cannot hear it does not mean it is silence. The moon takes your name every generation because your line owes it a name and stopped paying, but it will accept a given name in place of a stolen one. A true name, freely spoken by the one soul the moon has marked to speak it. That is the whole of it, Torvin. That is what my grandmother died believing, alone, mocked, certain. That is what I have kept alive in this cold room while your council laughed at me across their warm table. There is a way through the red moon. She took a breath. But it needs two. It needs you to fall, and it needs me to catch you. And I am the one it has to be. Not out of pride, I would give this to someone stronger in a heartbeat if I could. But I cannot. The moon marked me. It has to be me. And my wolf, at that, did the thing I have never been able to explain to anyone alive. All night he had strained toward the red in the windows, hungry to be unmade. Now he turned. His whole weight, like a great old hound turning heavily in a doorway, turned away from the bleeding moon and toward her, toward the small, plain, unafraid woman standing among her star charts, and settled there, facing her, the way he had never settled toward anything in 40 years. And on my chest, over the breastbone, an old cold place woke up. I should tell you about the mark, or none of the rest will make sense. Every alpha of my line is born with a ring on his breastbone, a pale shape like a scar that was there before there was any wound, the size of a coin, perfectly round. The old ones call it the wolf blood sign, and the healers call it a birthmark, a family shape handed down like the set of a jaw or the color of an eye. Whatever it is a dead thing. It does nothing. My father's did nothing. I bared his chest myself in his last years, and it was only a pale cold ring on the skin of a hollow, gentle stranger. His father's did nothing. I had carried mine 40 years and never once felt it do anything at all. I had all but forgotten it was there. It warmed. Standing in that red-lit doorway with the unmaking eating me alive from the inside, that dead gray ring on my chest grew warm, not the sick heat of fever. The warmth of a hearth found at the end of a long walk through snow, the warmth that makes you realize all at once exactly how cold you had been, how long you had been cold, how thoroughly you had stopped even calling it cold and started calling it simply yourself. That warmth, on my chest, in the middle of the worst night of my life. And I knew, the way you know the floor is under your feet, without looking, without doubting, that it warmed because of her, because she was near. Because the same moon that had cursed my whole line had, somewhere in its long cold turning, also made her, and made her for this. And I felt the whole shape of it land in me at once, too large to doubt, made her for me. You feel it, she said softly. She was looking at my chest where I had pressed my hand flat without deciding to. Her eyes had gone wide and bright. The mark. My grandmother swore it would wake, that it had stayed dead your whole life, not because it was truly dead, but because I was not here yet. It sleeps until the marked one is near. It has been cold on your chest for 40 years because for 40 years I had not yet come to stand in front of you, and now I have. Her voice caught. It is warm now, isn't it? Tell me it is warm. It is warm, I said. She let out a breath that shook, and I understood that she had believed this her whole life and had still, until this exact moment, never once had it proven, had carried it on nothing but an old woman's certainty and her own stubborn faith, through 20 years of every sensible person in her world telling her gently that she was mad. And now the dead mark was warm under a doomed man's hand, and it was the first outside proof she had ever been given that the thing she had staked her whole life on was real. I looked at this woman my entire hall had called a fool. This woman who had kept a dead craft alive in a cold room, for the sake of a stranger who had told her, kindly, to stop giving him hope. This woman who had watched my father die when she was 9 because her grandmother wanted her ready, and who had spent 20 years getting ready, and who had not run, who alone in all of Greymark had not run. "Say it is true," I said. My voice was going thin again, the red climbing higher in the windows behind me, the night sinking toward its worst hour. "Say the lore is true, all of it. What must be done? Tell me plainly and quickly while I am still enough myself to hear you." "You must let go," she said, "and I must catch you." "I do not understand." "You will," she said, "but I need you to hear the hard part first because it is very hard, and I will not lie to you about it to make it easier to say yes." She came a step nearer. "When the moon is full red at the very height of the unmaking, when your name has left you entirely, when there is nothing of Torvin left in you at all, that is the moment. Not before. It cannot be done while you still hold on to any piece of yourself. The moon will not take a name that is only half surrendered. It knows the difference between a name given and a name merely loaned. So you must let the unmaking take you all the way down. You must fall completely, past your name, past your wolf, past everything, into the same nothing your fathers fell into. And I must be there at the very bottom of it, holding your true name ready to give it back to you and pull you up by it." The red climbed, my name thinned. "It has never been done," she went on, and now her hands were shaking at her sides though her voice held. "I will not pretend otherwise. Every alpha before you fell into that nothing, and there was no one at the bottom holding on, and so they stayed fallen, they were unmade, and there was nothing left to pull back up. What I am asking you to do is to fall on purpose. To choose the very thing you have dreaded your whole life, the thing that took your father, and to trust, with no proof but a warm mark and a mad woman's word, that this one time there is someone at the bottom who will not let you stay down there. That is what I am asking. I know exactly what I am asking. I am asking you to jump." And I laughed. I could not help it. It was not a kind sound. It was the old contempt, one last raw time. "You ask me to give myself entirely to the thing that destroyed everyone I ever loved. To do, willingly, what I sat on the other side of a door and listened to it do to my father. And to trust for my life, for the whole of what I am, a woman the entire world calls mad." "Yes," she said, simply, without flinching. "That is exactly what I am asking, all of it. I told you I would not make it sound smaller than it is." She took another step, and now she was close enough that the mark on my chest glowed steady and warm between us, close enough that I could see she was younger than I had thought, and more frightened than her voice let on, and braver in that fright than any armored man in my hall had ever been. "But hear this, Torvin, because it is the thing that matters most. You have already tried the other way. Your fathers all tried the other way. They held on. They held on with everything they had, with all their strength and all their will and all their love of their children and their people, and they were unmade anyway, every one, alone in the dark. Holding on has never worked. Not one single time in the entire history of your blood. 12 alphas held on with all their might and 12 alphas fell. Her eyes held mine and would not let go. So I am not asking you to gamble your certainty for my madness. I am asking you to set down a thing that has failed 12 times running and try the one thing that has never once been tried. Let go. And I swear to you, on my grandmother's grave, on the only thing I have ever been sure of in my whole life, I will not let you fall past me." The red light reached its full flood. The moon in the high windows was a whole round wound now, drowning the hall in blood-colored light, and I felt the last of my name go. I will try to tell you what it was, though there are no words made for it, and I have never tried to say it before. It was not sleep and it was not death, it was dissolving. Everything that had ever been Torvin, my father's brow kissed one last time in this same hall, my mother's silver mercy moon, the wall I had stood on an hour or a lifetime ago, the weight of 40 years of ruling a cold kingdom, the promise I kept through an oak door, the name my mother chose for me before I was born, all of it thinning, graying, going out one by one like the fires had gone out. Until there was no hall and no red moon and no floor and no wolf and no I left anywhere to know that any of it had ever been. This was the unmaking. Now too late I understood why no man had ever come back from it. There was nothing left to come back. There was no one there to want to. There was no wanting anywhere at all. There was only the nothing, vast and quiet and complete, and it was not even terrible, because terror needs someone to feel it, and there was no longer anyone there. And in all of that nothing, from somewhere below me, or above me, or inside what was no longer me, I could not tell, there being no me to have an inside, a voice held out a single word. My name. She had it. She had been holding it the whole time. At the very bottom of the dark, in the deepest reach of the nothing, exactly where she swore she would be, she was there, holding my name cupped safe in her two hands, waiting. When everything else in the whole world was gone, when there was no Torvin anywhere in creation, there was still my name, kept warm in a stranger's keeping, held out to me across the void. Torvin. She spoke it into the nothing, clear and steady and unafraid, the way you would call a lost and frightened child home to you through thick fog. Torvin, come back now, I have you. I have your name and I am holding it and it is safe. Come back to it, Torvin. And I, the nothing that had been me, reached for it. I cannot tell you how. I will not pretend to. How does a man who is no longer a man reach for anything? I do not know. I only know that her voice was there when nothing else was, and my name was in her voice, and something that was almost nothing at all turned toward it. The way my wolf had turned from the red moon toward her song. The way a thing that has forgotten it was ever cold turns without knowing why toward the first warmth, and I took my name back out of her two hands. And because a man's name is the thread the whole of him hangs on, when I took my name I took myself along with it, hand over hand, up out of the nothing and back into the world. I came back all at once. I was on the stone floor of the great hall. I did not know how I had come there from the lower room, but there I was, on my back on the cold flags. And she was kneeling over me, both her hands pressed flat to the warm mark on my chest, and she was still saying my name, over and over, her voice worn ragged with it, tears standing bright on her face. Not tears of fear, I understood, looking up at her. Tears of the sheer, unspeakable effort of holding a whole man's soul at the bottom of the dark, in her bare hands, and not for one instant letting go. Above us through the high windows, the moon was draining. The red was running out of it. I watched it happen, running out like water out of a cracked bowl, faster and faster. And behind the red came the old honest silver, spreading and spreading across the moon's pale face until the whole of the great hall was flooded, for the first time in 100 years, in clean silver light. My mother's mercy-colored light. It poured through the high windows onto the two of us on the floor and made everything it touched look washed and new. My wolf was back. He was more than back. He was singing, I have no better word, and I have looked for one, a warmth in my chest so large and so bright it was almost more than I could hold, and it was all of it turned toward her. Every part of him faced her, wholly, as though after 40 years of solitude he had finally been introduced to the one he had been waiting his whole life to meet, and could not now look at anything else. And the mark under her hands was no longer a dead gray ring. It shone, a ring of pure silver light on my breastbone, alive and warm, and it was matched. I saw it the same instant she did, and I heard the small broken sound she made at the seeing by a ring of the very same silver light that had woken on the back of her own hand. Twin to mine, the moon mark, the bond. The thing an old woman had died believing in, mocked and alone, come true at last on a cold stone floor at the bottom of a cursed night, shining now on the two of us where all could see, had there been anyone left to see. You caught me, I said. My name was whole in my mouth. It had never once in 40 years of carrying it felt so entirely, so warmly, so certainly mine. I told you I would, she whispered. She was shaking now that it was done, all the iron steadiness pouring out of her at once, now that it was safe to let it, now that she no longer had to be strong enough to hold a soul at the bottom of the dark. I told you. I told all of them. My whole life I told them, and not one of them ever. And there the words gave out entirely, and she pressed her two hands harder against the warm shining mark on my chest, as if to be sure past all doubt that I was truly there, that I was real, that the man she had held together in the nothing had held. I sat up slowly. I took her two hands off my chest, gently, the way you would take up something you had almost lost forever, and I held them in both of mine. And I looked at this woman my whole kingdom had spent her whole life calling a fool. This woman whose grandmother had stood her at a window at 9 years old and made her watch my father die, so that one night, 20 years on, she would be ready to save his son. I looked at the silver ring shining on the back of her hand, twin to the one shining on my chest, and I understood all at once and completely that the curse of my blood and the saving of my blood had always been the same thing wearing two faces, that the moon that took had also, in the same breath, provided the one who could give it back, and that this woman had been made for me, marked for me, before either of us drew breath, and had spent her whole life at life quietly getting ready to reach into the worst dark there is, and pull me out of it. They were wrong about you, I said. Every one of them, every single day of your life they were wrong. Yes, she said, and she laughed a wet, disbelieving, breaking laugh, the laugh of a person who has been proven right at long last and can scarcely bear the weight of it landing on her all at once, after so many years of carrying only the mockery. They were. Oh, they were. The dawn came silver over Greymark. They came back at first light. My council, my warriors, my servants, creeping down out of the hills the way you approach a house where you know a death has happened, slow and quiet and braced to grieve, ready to find the hollow thing their alpha always became, ready to begin the long, sad work of caring for an empty man who wore my face, as they had cared for my father before me. My steward Bram came first, the man who had laughed loudest at her council table, who had told her flatly that 12 alphas had failed, and she was a fool to think she knew better. He came through the great doors with the gray morning light behind him, and he stopped dead on the threshold, and he saw me. He saw me standing whole in the center of my own hall in the clean silver light, myself, entirely, unmistakably myself. The first alpha of the gray hold in the whole long history of the line to walk out of his red moon still a man. And he saw, standing beside me, her hand in mine, the hedgewoman he had waved off his table like a bothersome fly. He could not speak, not one word, and behind him the others came, filling the great doorway and the courtyard beyond it, Osric my war chief, the old women who remembered, the servants, the whole of Greymark that had fled in the night, and one by one they went still and silent at what they saw. Until the hall and the yard were packed with people, and there was not a single sound in all of it. They stared at an alpha the curse had not taken. They stared at the woman who had done the thing all their hard practical wisdom had sworn, for 12 generations, could not be done. I did not make a speech. My fathers were men of speeches, some of them, and their fine words had saved not one of them from the red moon. So I did not reach for grand ones. I only lifted Saren's hand, the one with the silver ring still shining softly on it, so that every soul crowded into that hall and yard could see the mark plainly. And into that vast ringing silence I said the truest thing I have ever said as their king, and I said it slowly, so that no one could later pretend they had not heard. For 100 years and more, I said, you have called this woman a fool. You called her grandmother a fool before her, and buried the old woman with her craft still laughed at. And all the while you laughed at your warm tables, these two women alone kept alive the one single thing in all of Greymark that could save your alpha's life. Everything the wise men of this hold knew, for 12 generations, was wrong. Everything the fool believed was right. I let that sit in the silence a moment. Then I looked directly at Bram, who had laughed the loudest and who could not now meet my eyes. Last night when the moon went red, every wise head among you did the sensible thing and fled to the hills. I do not fault you for it. I would have sent you. But mark who did not flee. She stayed. This woman you would not so much as let finish speaking at my table. She stayed, alone, in a cold room, and when the unmaking came for me she walked toward it. She stood at the bottom of a dark that no man of my blood has ever once returned from, and she held my name in her two hands, and she would not let go of it, and she pulled me back into the world by it. I am standing here, I am myself. I know my own name and my father's and every one of yours because of her. Because of her, and because of no other soul in this hall or this kingdom or this world. I turned so that I faced her, and only her, though the whole of Greymark watched. So the next time she speaks, I said, still to all of them but looking at her, you will listen. Not because your alpha commands it, though I do. Because she has earned it 100 times over, and every one of you owes her from this dawn forward, every single year of the rest of my life, and every year of every alpha who will ever come after me. And then, in front of all of them, in the clean silver morning light, I did the only thing that was worth doing. I did not set a crown on her head. I did not stage some great ceremony with all its cold pomp, the very ceremonies my fathers had loved, and which had comforted none of them at the end. I only lifted her mark-bright hand to my lips, this woman that no one in all the world had ever once chosen, whom the moon itself had chosen before the world was old, and I honored her, humbly, the way a man honors the one who reached down into the deepest dark there is and would not let him fall. Stay, I said, quietly. It was meant only for her, though every soul in that silent hall heard it clear. Not as the keeper of a cold, forgotten room at the end of my hold. Stay as its Luna, as the lady of Greymark, as mine if you will have a man who told you 3 months ago to stop giving him hope, if you can forgive a man that. Her eyes were bright and streaming and steady all at once. I have been telling you for 3 whole months that there was a way through, she said, and she was half laughing and half weeping now and did not care who saw. I was never once going to stop believing in you, Torvin, not when your council laughed, not when you sent me away, not even when you yourself asked me to. I was made to believe in you. It is the only thing I have ever been for. Of course I will have you. And then, softer, only for me, under all the silver light. I have been yours since I was 9 years old and did not yet know your name. Greymark has known many red moons since. That is the strangest gift of that night, and the one I did not understand fully until years had gone by. The curse did not merely pass over me and go on waiting for my son the way it had waited for me. It broke. Whatever long debt of names my line had owed the moon, it was paid in full that night, paid by a name freely surrendered and freely caught. A debt settled clean at last after 12 generations of it being taken by force, and the moon has never once come for an alpha of Greymark again. My sons will not stand on the outer wall as I stood, feeling their own names loosen and slip. They will not send their halls into the hills. They will not walk alone into a red-flooded dark with no one at the bottom to catch them. The children in my hold now grow up thinking the red moon only a strange and lovely thing, a rare, beautiful night, a wonder to point at in the sky and tell small stories about, and they do not know, because Saren and I have worked all our lives to make a world in which they need never know, that it was ever anything at all to be afraid of. She did that. The hedgewoman my whole council laughed at. She did not save one man on one night. She reached into the dark and unmade the unmaking itself, and saved every man of my blood who will ever come after me. Down all the years I will not live to see, and not one of those far children will ever know her name, or that they owe her the ordinary unterrified lives they will lead. And that has never once troubled her. I asked her about it, one quiet evening years on. Whether it grieved her to have done the greatest thing anyone in the whole history of Greymark has ever done, and to have it forgotten by the very people it saved. She only smiled and said that being right had never been the point, that the point had always been the doing. My grandmother did not keep the lore so that someone would thank her for it, she said. She kept it so that one day it would work. It worked. That is enough. It was always going to have to be enough. A thing like this is never thanked by the ones it saves, because the ones it saves never know they needed saving. That is not sad, Torvin. That is what it looks like when a thing is done well. Bram came to her some weeks after, my proud steward who had laughed the loudest. He came to her privately without me. I only heard of it after, and he stood before the woman he had waved off his table, and he could not get his words out at first. A hard, old, practical man unmade in a different way by shame. And Saren, who owed him nothing, who had every right in the world to let him stand there and choke on it, took pity on him instead. She put her hand on his arm before he could finish stammering and told him it was all right, that she held no anger, that a man who trusts only what he can prove is not a fool but a good steward doing his work, and that the fault had never been his doubting, only in how sure the doubting had let itself become. He was never the same man after. He listened from then on when she spoke. They all did, not from fear of me, from her. That is the whole of it, or nearly. Last red moon, for they still come, only harmless now, only beautiful. I could not find her in the hall at supper, and I went looking, and I found her out on the outer wall, in the very place where the whole of this began, where I had stood 40 years a doomed man and felt my name start to leave me. She was there in the dark, alone, watching the old crimson climb slowly up the sky over the sleeping hold, the same red that once meant the end of everything, turning now to nothing but a wonder. I went and stood beside her. There was no fear in it any more, for either of us. There had not been for years. Just the two of us on the cold wall, gray now, both of us, and long married, and the red moon that had tried so hard and so long to take me from the world turning slowly and harmlessly to silver above a hold full of sleeping people who would wake unafraid. She reached over without looking. She always knows exactly where I am, in the dark or the light, and laced her fingers into mine, the silver ring on her hand catching the moonlight the way it has every day since that first dawn. And she said the thing she says to me every red moon, quiet, only for me, in the same voice she once used to say my name at the very bottom of the dark, when it was the only thing left in all the world. See, she said, I told you there was a way through. There was, there always had been. It had been there the whole time, waiting through 12 generations of the wisest men in Greymark swearing it did not exist. It only ever needed someone the world called a fool to keep believing in it, on the long cold nights when no one else would. In a cold room, alone, laughed at, sure, and then to be there when it counted at the very bottom of the dark, holding on with both hands and refusing to let go.